to It's About Time Conversations with Charlize and Yolanda, where we bring our experiences and our expertise to the table to address relevant topics that impact our lives and our communities. This is the place to be authentic, to be transparent, and of course, to be inspired. So, welcome to our virtual table. And I'm Charlize Lewis.
Hello, everybody. I'm Yolanda Mason, and today we have an amazing show. Our show centers on the importance of social justice, advocacy, activism, and leadership in the beloved community. So it's a well-known fact that the last year has been one where the fight for social justice has been an increased focus in this country and even abroad. The protests that were sparked last summer in response to the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd once again centered on the struggle for equality and racial justice, two subjects that have continued to impact people of color, even though the civil rights movement began over 65 years ago. Our guest today is the perfect person to help us examine the historical context of social justice and the progress that we've made, and especially how far we have to go. Devine Carama is a social justice advocate, a community leader, and a social media influencer. Devine is a gifted hip hop artist, a teacher, and an entrepreneur who leverages his love for hip hop to engage young people in Kentucky and far beyond. He has developed a mentoring platform and public speaking presentation that focuses on inspiring young people to reach their full potential through education, through creative expression, and through leadership. Devine, we are so excited to have you on the show today, and we just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to sit with us.
I appreciate the platform. What's up, family?
Hey, we're so glad you decided to join us. We're going to have a good conversation today. But before we move into, our overarching big conversation about social justice and advocacy and activism, I can't talk today for some reason. I don't know what's going on with that. But let's talk about the work that you're doing right now with our communities and our students and our families, especially in the Fayette County area. I know that you have finished a few Black History presentations, and I know you just did one tonight with Garrett Morgan Elementary School. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the lessons that you think are important for our young students to know about our history?
Sure. I think the most important thing is leadership from within. Probably the overarching theme to my nonprofit, even my business, and the message that I'm giving the youth and whatever I'm doing, whether it's the music or whether it's Black History Month presentations, is that they can be leaders within themselves. Like, everybody doesn't have to be monolith. Everybody doesn't have to be cut from, the same cloth. We can have different backgrounds. We can come from different money. We can come from different cultures. Everybody just has to figure out what their unique element is that they bring to the fight and lead from that. And I think when we start teaching young people that, I think we start to create more leaders, because I know when I was coming up, you had to be a rich, straight, white male that was highly educated. And if you weren't that, you couldn't be a leader. And we know that that's just not the case. And thinking that, a lot of young people don't even try to engage community. They don't even try to uplift because they just feel they don't meet the criteria. So with me, I'm always telling them, hey, whatever your unique gifts and talents are, you can lead from there.
That's good. And you mentioned your organization, Believing in Forever. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about the Luna Library Project, which we know is named after your beloved daughter, Kamaria. And so I even have, let me show you these. You gave my niece and my daughter books. And so I have those sitting here, trying to keep her organized in her books, and just making sure she also has access to books that show people that look like us.
That's right.
Make sure that as she is building up her own personal library, she has those things in her library. So talk to me a little bit about the Luna Library Project.
Sure. So as a lot of people know, and for those that don't know, I am a girl dad, and one of my daughters, Kamaria, passed away last Easter. She was 18. She got in a car wreck. And one of the things, the beautiful thing about when your kids start to become teenagers is they start figuring things out. They start figuring out what it is they're passionate about. They become sometimes a little too vocal than you're used to. And she was really at that space in her life. And one thing that she really believed in was expanded African-American education. When she was a sophomore, she wrote a grant to have free Black History Month classes at the Carnegie Center for people in the community. She felt that African-American history classes should be mandatory in Fayette County public schools. And she just felt kids needed to understand the broader scope of their history, not just slavery, but pre-slavery. Let's go back to our lineage in Africa, but then also post-slavery. And let's talk about some of those civil rights icons that don't get as much publicity as a Martin Luther King. And she just felt that that was important. So when she passed away, I said, you know what? I want to keep this legacy of her heart alive. So we started a mobile library, the Luna Library. As you mentioned, all Black history books, Black character focused books, and they're free to the community. And for our kids, they need to see characters in books that look like them. Studies say that when you can relate to the character, it increases your desire to want to read more, and reading is the foundation of education. So it can empower and embolden our children, but even our white brothers and sisters, they can learn and gain knowledge, which will give them context to some of the things that are leading to the divisions that we see today. You'd be surprised how many, young white kids, Mr. Devine, why are they out protesting in the streets? And they want to understand, but they don't have the knowledge. And I feel the Luna Library and some of the books in this library can provide context to some of our allies and their children to ultimately bring people together. So we've given away almost 1,000 books, and I think it's just been like 6 months. So it's been a blessing so far.
I love that. And you said something really, really important about having those books accessible. When I was 12, like my daughter, I didn't have that. Our school library definitely didn't have that. And back then, y'all remember the Bookmobile? I think I'm aging myself.
I remember.
I remember.
Yes, I love the Bookmobile. And you don't even have that anymore in most cases.
Right.
So yes, I appreciate the project, and even, what you've done for my niece and my daughter in terms of making sure they have that literature in their homes.
And I would even say this real quick. Like you said, too, books, especially today, are expensive. So that can be a barrier. Whereas the library was always, it eliminated that barrier, whether it was the public library or the school library, especially as a kid. So when you have a lack of diversity in those free spaces, for a lot of families out there, that just means that they're not going to get that diversity because they can't afford to go out and buy a bunch of books, which is one of the reasons we wanted to make it free and give these books away. So, I remember those days growing up. My mom would go to wherever she had to go to try to get more diverse books in the house, and it was hard even then. So, we feel like we're filling in a gap, on both sides. So,
yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So Devine, we've kind of talked about like your work that you do in the schools, which I think, your work with your nonprofit, of course, which also leads to your work with the schools and the presentations that you do, which I think you're really, really well known for. But something that I think that people are just starting to learn about you from, just from the energy and what I hear, people are really thinking about your positioning last summer. When we did the protests. So I think that you've always done things that have been incredible to kind of draw attention to subjects that need attention. For instance, voting, when you decided to walk around the state, and when you've drawn attention to the water situation in Flint. I think you've always leveraged your platform in a way that was incredibly responsible and generous. And I think that's what people really love about you and what they admire. And so in thinking about just transitioning a bit to the last year that we've had. And it's interesting because if you're living in 2021 and someone says, what about the last year? you already understand that we're talking about the fact that 2020 was incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
And no accident that we're talking to you really right before we run up on March 13th. So in a couple of weeks, it'll be March 13th. And as many people know, that is the day that Breonna Taylor was shot in her home. And also that was the day that COVID-19 was a thing, like literally on TV they confirmed it. And so this last year has been one that has been incredibly challenging on so many levels. And many people said that we fought a pandemic that was COVID, but we also had another pandemic. And it was the pandemic that was around this idea of race and policing in America, thinking about all of those really kind of heavy topics. And we saw you really push forward to the front from really serving, protesting, talking about it, using your voice. And then the next thing we knew, you were in Louisville and you were there more than one, several times, traveling back and forth. And I watched that on Facebook. I watched that happen. And so I really want to invite you just to reflect on the past year to kind of start this part of the conversation. So much has happened. Black Lives Matter. We saw protests open up in a lot of cities. And it's interesting because Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery were not the first Black people gunned down by police in several cities and several places. But I want to know from you, what was the difference this time? Something happened this time that caused people to really just have that moment of, I'm fed up. Not just Black people, but I think many of our white allies, I think people all over the world globally. I was listening to an interview with Daniel Kaluuya, who played Fred Hampton so powerfully in Judas and the Black Messiah, and he said the name Breonna Taylor in an interview on the Breakfast Club. So what I want to know from you is just from you being you lead from three places. You either lead out in front of the people, behind the people, or among the people. And as a leader, I saw you move from the front to the middle and lead among the people this summer. So I want to know, what was it about this time? People say enough is enough. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I think 2020, and this kind of leads into why I kind of threw myself in the middle. 2020 will be one of the most memorable and historic years, not for good reasons, but ever, like in the history of our country. Like our grandkids and their kids and their kids will study 2020 in history books. So I think what kind of thrust me into the middle of it, coming off the heels of, my daughter passing away, was when baby Zola grows up and her kids grow up and they say, granddaddy, daddy, what did you do? What were you doing in 2020? I want to be able to look my kids and my grandkids in their eyes and say, I tried my best to be a part of the solution. So that's kind of the short version of why I kind of immersed myself into anything that I could do in 2020 to try to better our communities and just mankind and womankind, just, all of it. But I think as a whole, Yolanda, I think everybody was stuck in a crib. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we were stuck in the house, news on the 24-hour loop, because we're looking for the latest on the coronavirus. So we were all kind of forced to witness things that have been going on within our community, but now we're seeing not only injustices, but some of the most egregious injustices that we've seen in a long time happen in close proximity, right? George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake.
Absolutely.
I think now when we're seeing this, I think the conversation was no longer about politics, because I think a lot of people have framed racial injustice in politics. And I think for the first time, people were like, wait a minute, that's just wrong. So once the conversation moved from politics to right and wrong, moved from political ideology to morals, that's when you seen everybody getting upset. And I think that was a large part of it. But it wasn't just that. It was even the racial disparities in COVID were being highlighted, right?
Yeah.
So now there's this flashlight on the healthcare system. Now Black women are beginning to stand up and talk about how they're treated differently when they go into labor than their white counterparts, and there's statistics to back that up. Now we're looking at kids who, some kids are growing up in environments where their only square meals out of the day are when they go to school. So now kids aren't in school, and we're seeing the impacts that it's having on different sectors of our country. And a lot of those sectors are the way that they are because of systemic oppression and racism. So it was almost a perfect storm of injustice that I think just opened people's eyes on all walks of life to what was going on. And I think that's why 2020 kind of became, our civil rights era, in my humble opinion. So for me, it was just, all right, you can't just be rapping about it. You know what I'm saying? Because music is usually where I speak on the injustices, and I use my life to serve, right? I'm a serve the people, the community, try to uplift from the bottom up, but I'm allow my music to be my platform to speak on what I don't like. But I just couldn't stand by and do that in 2020. Like, the music can be the platform, but I got to get in the fight with the people. So that's just what it was for me.
Yeah. And I think it's powerful how you talked about, I heard you saying, the undertones of what you said. You pointed to so many really good reasons that things changed in 2020. But I love that you said that there was almost a forcing. There was this thing where our backs were against the wall and we had to do something. And so people chose to come out fighting. And when I say fighting, I mean fighting a good fight towards the world that we know, the way that we know the world should be. Again, because we can argue. When we saw George Floyd get snuffed out with a knee to his neck and a motionless face, this officer who didn't even have any concern, wasn't even worried about what he was doing. We saw him void of emotion. It forced us. And I like that you pointed that out.
And I would even real quick throw this in there. Like, we can't forget about like the political season that we were in too. Like, it was an election year, and you had the most powerful person in the world making the most blatantly, like, he threw the dog whistle in the trash. Like, you know what I mean? Like, his racism became so overt. And that coming from the highest office in the land, just kind of pounding on the Black people that were getting hit by the economy, getting disproportionately impacted by COVID. We watching our brothers and sisters get murdered, you know what I mean? And justice is minimal at best. And then you got the guy who's supposed to be, pulling the strings, most, biggest office in the world. And it seems like he was against us. So it was just a lot. It was a lot.
And I think that's why it went from this American problem. I loved to see how our brothers and sisters globally and across the pond, as they say, how they responded. I spent a lot of time really listening to that kind of conversation. So I think it's powerful. What you're saying makes so much sense. It just got to a point, it was a tipping point. And when it tipped, it tipped. So about some of the subjects that you kind of center your mentorship on, because one of the that I also admire in the schools. It started out small, and then the next thing I knew, I heard he's going to North Carolina, he's going to Jersey, he's going here. So it started to really bubble. So your mentorship has grown so much. And one of the subjects that you center your mentorship on is leadership. So many people, and I'm going to kind of again use you as like somebody to gauge the temperature from the inside, because I interview it was actually on The Breakfast Club, which obviously I love. I watch it all the time. But they were talking about the fact that there are no central key leadership persons representing us for civil rights. So the person went on to elaborate and say, well, we had Martin Luther King, we had Malcolm X, we had Andrew Young, we had people like Chairman Fred Hampton and Bobby Seale, we had Diane Nash. Now we don't have that centralized point person to lead the struggle for for social justice and civil rights. And I have my thoughts about that. But what do you think about that? Some people tend to think that there is a void of a kind of centralized leadership team that existed maybe in the 60s. I want to know what
Sure.
your thoughts are about it, and how would you address that? Would you agree with that person, or would you say, no, that's not the case?
I would agree with that sentiment, but I would also say that I'm not sure that we need an MLK or a Malcolm X in 2020. I think that we need to shift to community leadership as opposed to one central organization or person to follow. And I say that because in progress, you are seeing Black ideology, our experiences, everything that we are dealing with as a race in the community being sectioned off into so many different, viewpoints. So I don't know if we could ever just follow one person, not in 2020. And then also with social media, they're going to find some way to tear him down. He did this when he was 18. You know what I mean? His wife ain't Black enough. You know what I mean? Like he was at the club last week. Like, so I think, in 2020, in this cancel culture, being attacked from the outside, but attacking ourselves from the inside, that kind of crab in the bucket mentality. I think if we put all our hopes and dreams into a person, you look at Barack Obama, who I thought was a great president, but because we put all of our hopes in him, whatever he didn't get done, now now he didn't do nothing for us. We was better off, you know what I mean? So for me, Yolanda, I think it's community leadership. I think Sarah Williams and April need to do what they do. I think Corey Dunn and Brandon need to do what they doing.
I agree.
I think y'all in this podcast need to be doing what you're doing. I need to do what I do. As long as there is respect among the ranks of those who are grabbing the reins of leadership within the community, as long as there's no infighting, I think we can lead from different sectors and silos within the community, and we come together when needed. But I just think that, the Black experience isn't one thing, because Corey Dunn may have a completely different viewpoint on community engagement than Devine Carama. Sure. And that's okay, as long as we both are invested in the upliftment of our people and bringing people together. So I think we got to I think when you kind of unofficially elect this person as the person, then it's like, if you don't agree with that person, then where do you lie? You know what I mean? So that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I like the diversity and community leadership, and I want to keep that open.
Yeah, and I like the collaboration, because collaboration is important.
Yes,
it's important.
We need more of that.
Exactly, and I say this all the time. My area is education. Yolanda's area is social work.
Yeah,
I can do what I do in my field, and she can do what she does in her field, and we can get it done, reach more people, and bring more people together.
Look, I say it all the time. Whether it's a football team or a basketball team, the quarterback can't do everything. He can't run the ball, tackle people, coach the game, kick the field goal. His job is to throw. So if everybody does their job and we all come together, football team is solid. It's a metaphor I use a lot. I feel like our community is the same. My ultimate dream would be to build this big community center, right? But I would want to have like meditation pods and mental health specialists and an athletic league and so many things that are not in my know-how, which means I would need to collaborate with people who do totally different things than me in order for us to create this space that can help many. And I agree with you all. To me, that's the best way to uplift our community. But there's got to be a common thread. There has to be some communication. Even when it's not collaboration, we got to communicate. We can't be side-eyeing. We can't be hating on this person.
Communicate respectively.
That's right. That's right.
I really like how you broke that down, because you gave me another way to think about that. And I like that you talked about the fact that just because we think differently, or we have a different methodology, or we have a different approach or presentation, that it doesn't negate anything that we're doing. And I think that's important, especially for people who will be watching and listening, because maybe that thought is out there. Maybe that thought is out there that we need to be kind of this group think and we all need to be going left. But actually, we can find where our talents and our passions and our burdens are, and begin to work in those spaces, as long as, again, we're able to communicate. So thank you
That's
for
it.
breaking. I really like that. That was good. I'm glad
Right.
I so here's another question that I kind of wanted to talk to you, because we talk a lot about engagement, and you've even kind of talked about it as you've answered the other questions. The engagement of, we need people to be involved, and it always becomes very controversial, again, because we know where we want to go, but we have such different ways to engage in mind. So I kind
Mhm.
of want to know, what do you think are the most important things for people, like the people who are listening to this podcast, who are inspired by what you're saying, and they think, I get out there, but they don't know what has to happen to ensure that social justice is achieved in America. So, for instance, some say that voting is the thing. Everybody has to vote, and we have to make sure that we get certain people in office who represent our interests. Then we have others who say education is the key. You have to be educated. We have some people who think that it should come from the top. And then we have others like yourself who think we need to participate in grassroots kind of organizations, the way that Martin Luther King started, if you will,
Yeah.
to for that social justice, continues to advance and continues to grow in America for people of color. So I want to know, in your experience, in your opinion, what is the most important thing? What is the focus? If someone is sitting there listening to you now and they're
Mhm.
saying, I know what to do next to engage, what would you suggest?
Mhm. So it has to come from the bottom and the top. One thing that I think we've seen now in some of the political movies and some of the documentaries is that Martin Luther King was marching literally in the street with the people, but he was also at the White House meeting with the president.
Mhm.
He also died so people could vote and be a part of the political process, but he also believed in grassroots work.
Mhm.
So the first thing I think that we have to do is we got to start from the ground up. I'm just of that belief. I think we increase our leverage as a community the more educated we are, and not just textbook, but just aware of how the system works, how politics work. The more educated we are, we gain more leverage. The more economic power that we have within our community, we gain more leverage. The more we serve and uplift our children and our own community, we gain leverage. So not only does our living experience get better, but then now we got the power to start making some moves. Fayette County Public School is now a majority minority school system, which means the majority of our kids are non-white. So the demographics are changing. We are progressing as a city. I look at Lexington and Kentucky the same way Georgia was in 2020. I believe that politically this state could flip in 10 years. But in order to do that, we got to get people engaged. And I think it's a long game. One thing that I struggle with internally, and I tell Sierra this, a lot of people see me in the newspaper today or me get notoriety today, but they don't know the 15 years of
Sure.
people telling me, bro,
Mhm.
poetry, why you rap like that? You don't got a degree. You don't belong in a frat. What church you go to? What, like, people telling me no. You know what I mean? The years of me grinding, loading trucks at UPS while fielding calls from trying to organize the coat drive while I'm loading trucks. Like, so people think a lot of this stuff because of the advent of social media that it happens overnight and it's about the clout. But it took me years, over a decade, really 2 decades, to get where I'm starting to get traction. So I want people to understand that it's not a quick fix. It's not about the clout per se, that you got to be willing to um, you may never live to see the fruits of your labor, and you'd have to be okay with that. You know what I mean? Martin Luther King didn't get to live to see Barack Obama, but that doesn't make his contributions any less. So the way I approach my work is the long game. It doesn't matter if people don't get it. It doesn't matter if I'm not seeing what I want to see right away. I'm planting the seed. And if I'm planting the seed and watering it through my consistency, and God is the sun shining down on it, eventually that seed is going to grow. So I want people to understand that, and just do whatever they can do. Like you said, anything. Like if you could change one life, it may not get 1 million likes on Facebook, it may not make the newspaper, but you are doing God's work. And that is the way, even today, that I approach my work. Because if every time I got 10 likes on Facebook, I sat back content, like, all right, no, it's still young people dying. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a young kid that I mentored that just got shot and killed a few days ago. Like, so it's that hunger that we have to maintain, and the work has to continue. But at the same token, we have to have balance in our approach to be able to sit in rooms where we can impact from the top down. And I think that that's important. Giving him his flowers, you look at what a Raymond Daniels is doing. He's doing a lot of things behind the scenes people don't know. You know what I mean? He's in rooms that I can't sit in that's helping people on the ground. Mm-hmm. So we can't poo-poo on the people that's in the rooms and it's working at the top. But then also the people at the top can't look down at people like me that might not have a college degree, that might have a sketchy past, and look down upon me. I think it's going to take both. And I think people got to figure out ways that they can impact both. And if they can't, then they need to find ways that they can impact one of them. But I think it's going to come from both, Yolanda and Charlize. I think it's coming from the bottom and the top. And I think those two entities in the 60s, they understood each other. You know what I mean? Now I think it's a little too much infighting and pointing fingers, and he too bougie and she too ghetto, and we need all that. We need all that.
Important things. You said two really key things. First of all, you got to do the work. Mm-hmm. That's important. You don't get far by not doing the work. That's the first thing you said. And there's something else. You are pretty much talking about we need to be able to offer people the grace. We need to offer them grace. Stop criticizing. Stop creating enemies of each other, and to offer people grace.
That's it. That's good. Because if I never had it, and I have to tell and understand everything I'm saying tonight, I have to tell myself. Sierra, tell you, it's a constant. I'm constantly trying to better even myself in the aspects of what we're talking about. Like, because if people didn't have grace for me, I'd have been done. I wouldn't even be here. You know what I'm saying? So we can't be so quick to write people off, cancel people. We got to allow people the flexibility and room to grow in their calling. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Keep them humble, because there's a lot of people out here that want to be the one, but their character hasn't developed yet. So we still have to develop character, keep our brothers and sisters. We got to humble them, but we give them grace too, though.
I mean, you literally have done like a 5-day revival and you don't even know it. You ain't even trying. You ain't
crazy.
No, trying to control my voice while you're talking, because I'm a church kid. So when somebody's telling the truth, I believe. Amen. But Charlize told me I need to be quiet while the people talking, because my age get a little loud. But I was like holding it. I was biting my tongue, because I think it's powerful. And I think about the transparency that you have on Facebook. And I'm not going to lie. I often say, when I see you being transparent, like even me and Charlize were having a conversation, we were like, that's the kind of transparency we need, but that ain't always easy. Like, as much as I admire but I feel like you just gave a reason for it. I think your transparency, now I see it's not just because you're just that. I mean, I'm sure you are courageous in that, but I feel you saying need to do that so that people can understand that you didn't just wake up when Instagram became a thing, or you didn't just wake up when Facebook became. Yeah, so that's powerful.
I try to tell my mama that who be getting on me, and it's a few people, a couple of mentors, my mom. You don't need to be sharing. You don't need to be sharing all that. You're doing too much. But yes, it's real, but it is intentional, because I want people to know, because you know how social media works. You know how this thing works. I don't want them seeing one thing and not knowing what it took to get there, or I don't want them seeing me and assuming it was cookie cutter. Like, I want you to know I went through it. I made mistakes. I've went through trials and got there to what you see. So you can do it. So it is very, very intentional. The reason I share so much.
It's inspirational too. So, we're kind of rolling down to the end of it, but thanks for kind of answering these broad kind of questions, because we wanted to take advantage of having you here and just like getting you in this kind of atmosphere that's a little bit more intimate than typically, because you have so much to offer, and there's so many places. I mean, I could see you on the news, once a week for a while, but at the same time, these moments where you really kind of expand your thoughts, I think a lot of people are really listening, especially like young brothers and sisters. I think they really need to hear you. So thinking about, and I thought about this when I was watching the Fred Hampton movie. I've probably watched it 7 times since it came out, just because it's like in my soul. Like, I've never experienced anything as life-changing. I literally have watched it for different reasons, probably 6 or 7 times. And there was something that made me think about you, because we're having this interview with you. So I thought about you. It's no secret that you're an incredible, incredible hip hop artist. First of all, I think that's something that I always emphasize to people when I talk to them now, because I didn't know that the term local rapper doesn't always have a good connotation. I didn't until social media. People make memes, they make jokes, whatever. But like, that's why I'm careful, because I grew up on hip hop. Like, hip hop is my foundationally. I know where I was when I first heard Bonita Applebum, right? So I'm into hip hop at a different level, but lyrically, that's what's always appealed to me. And I don't rap, but lyrically, it played into everything I talk, to the words I use. Like, I talk listening to hip hop, honestly. And the reason. So I was thinking about the fact that you're just, if nothing else, a lyricist, like not just a hip hop artist, not just a local hip hop. Because your lyricism is, and I've said this before, I've said it publicly, I've said it in a million different spaces, so this is nothing new. But your lyricism pushes you above the average local rapper. That's just the way it is. And that's, I'm saying that, not you, so, but nobody, it's just the fact.
Appreciate
so
that.
Movie, when I was watching Judas and the Black Messiah, which had so many incredible moments, I was thinking about my favorite scene in the movie. I was watching it when Chairman Fred Hampton gets out of jail, and he gives this impassioned speech, right? He gives this impassioned speech, and he's talking to the people. He tells them that he's free from jail, and he tells them how he wants to move forward. He explains the point of what he's doing for people that don't understand. And while he's giving that speech, he cues his team to play this incredible music that I later found out that Bobby Seale created. I don't know what happened or how he created this. It's like a drum beat, right? It's like, and when he starts talking and that music gets behind him, if you don't have chills, I don't know if you have a soul. It's like Fred Hampton is saying these incredible words. He's talking about wherever there's people, there's power, and these incredible things that have become now like memes and things that people hang on their walls, right? Because I have one. Talking about his love for the people, how he lives and dies for the people. And there's this drum beat playing behind it that is killing the room. The room is electric. And so that made me think about how the combination of his speech and that word presentation, along with the music, move the souls of the people, because that's nothing new, right? We saw in the movie Selma that when Martin Luther King would feel down, and Martin Luther King did struggle with depression and anxiety, terrible anxiety. Not everyone knows that. He would call Mahalia Jackson, and she would sing "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." I thought about Aretha Franklin. When she said R-E-S-P-E-C-T, they may have assumed that she was talking to a man, but Aretha later said, I wasn't talking to a man. I was talking to the powers that be, and I was talking to my people. I was talking for people of color and for women to say, you're going to respect me. Just like Brown, when he said, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. That may not sound like a big deal to us now, but then it was a statement that caught the attention of the people. When he said, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, and you saw people with afros, crowds of people with their fists in the air, it was completely electric, and the messaging and the music together created this kind of soundtrack that we still appreciate even today. And I know you do because you're a musician. So as an artist, I couldn't help but think about that, thinking about those pictures that you post, and I love them. You're standing in the middle of a gym, the whole entire gym is filled with kids, and it's just you, right? So it's always, again, I'm a nerd. It's powerful imagery. It's you, it's your signature Kango, and it's your hands, it's your arms. And I'm like, what is he saying to them? Because they're listening, nobody's talking. And every time you post a picture like that, I always smile because I think that this is so powerful. But I also begin to think about not just your words, but your music. So I thought, this guy is a lyricist, he's a hip hop artist. His lyricism drives his speaking, I know, because I've heard you speak. So talk to me about art and activism. Talk to me, that was a long intro, wasn't it? But talk to me about
Perfect.
I got really excited. But how that comes together for you. How does your music, not only your music, but the music of your peers and the music of other artists that you admire, and then also your word presentations and the power of your speech and the power of the messaging that you have, how does that come together, or does it? Does it intersect? Can you talk about that?
It definitely does. I think being a student of history, when you think about the struggles of getting through Jim Crow, I immediately think of the Harlem Renaissance. When you get into the 60s and the civil rights era, you know, from the Nina Simones to the James Brown, when we kind of saw technology take a turn in the early 70s or late 70s, early 80s, that is when hip hop became that voice for the voiceless. That's when 911 is a joke. That's when Fight the Power. That's F the Police. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, the foundation of hip hop is built on being a voice for people who didn't have a voice. So it's synonymous. Like, you obviously, once money got into it and the way it's packaged and presented to middle America in 2020 and what we hear on the radio doesn't represent this, but hip hop was founded. You couldn't even say hip hop without community. Like it was one and the same. It's funny because that's one of the number one questions I get. Like, how did you transition from hip hop artist to activist? And I have to remember that not everybody understands the foundation of hip hop culture, because hip hop is not just music. It was a culture, a revolutionary culture. To me, it was a natural transition. Right. You know what I mean? Because it was so synonymous, and everything that I was doing within the music just naturally translated to activism. So for me, it's a natural wedding, like merging the two things in an effort ultimately to uplift my people in my community and bring people together. That's the goal, and to inform and inspire. But I would say this, you know, hip hop was created in poor communities of color. So one of the reasons hip hop is so edgy, one of the reasons the content isn't always pretty, is because the communities in which it came from were experiencing some ugly things. And when hip hop was birthed, we were at the very beginning of the crack era, which turned into the war on drugs, which was really a war on poor people of color. So hip hop was the soundtrack to that struggle. So I want people to understand that the grittiness and the ugliest of some of the content is because of where it came from. And if you want to see prettier hip hop, then you got to go to the communities in which it comes from and dedicate your life to make those communities pretty. But even with the ugliness, there was always hopefulness. So even though you were talking about the struggle and you were going through it, hip hop was kind of that light at the end of the tunnel. Hip hop is what provided the people, whether it was just a block party and made them forget their worries for 2 hours, or the imagery and the lyrics that made people think, man, like Nas said, maybe I can rule the world. You know what? Chuck D was right. Fight the power. So even though you're immersed in struggle and trauma, hip hop lets you know that there was another side if you continue to fight. Hip hop was that hope. God gave us hip hop. So that's how I envision the culture, and always will. And especially now as I've gotten older and got my own children. And the crazy thing is, when I got into hip hop, my parents didn't even think it would last a couple months. They said, this ain't even real music. This ain't gonna last. You know, now it's the most streamed genre of music in the world. And it's global. Yes. International, like there's no, like it impacts and informs every other genre of music. Now you're seeing, you could turn a country music radio and you might hear some hip hop infused production or a hip hop verse on a country music song. You know what I mean? So how do we use that? Because that's a responsibility. I know in every school I go to, when there's 1,000 kids in the gym, every single one of them, it's a good chance they've either heard a hip hop record before, or they're immersed in hip hop culture. So that's a responsibility. So how can I take the world's most popular art form and use it to captivate them, inspire them, inform them, lift them up, and bring them together? And that's ultimately kind of the perfect storm of where God has me within my purpose. And that's why I love hip hop so much. And I'm 40 years old and I'm still going hard, because I understand the impact that it has on our young people. And as long as I still got breath in my lungs, and as long as I can still make a difference, I'm gonna keep touching the mic. You know what I'm saying? But can't go in all. But that, you know, it's just me.
You gotta say it. You gotta keep right there where you're at, because like what you're doing works. And also your authenticity is why it's good. Like it would do you to try to, you know how some people try to like bring their look up to something, or bring their look, make it more trendy or more in tune with what's going on now, but you know it's not them. Like that doesn't work. Like you have to be authentic to yourself.
It doesn't. Look, and one thing with the kids, you know, the crazy thing is like kids can smell a fake from a mile away. Yes. So when I'm talking to I'm engaging a lot of UK students now, and that's their number one question. How can I, as a white privilege, you know, that comes from a well-to-do family, go into William Wells Brown Community Center and impact these kids? And I say, well, the first thing you need to do is act like the white, rich, privileged kid that you are, right? Yeah. You can be informed. I can tell you, you know, in what ways you can engage, but what will pierce through more than anything is your authenticity, your truth. Because even if you're completely different from them, in seeing you being so emboldened in your differences, you know what I mean? Like they're gonna be like, dang, it's a little white person walking up in the hood, unashamed of who they are. Well, shoot, I could be just as confident in who I am in any other space. Exactly. So you can still inspire people by just being you. And I think for me, I took a lot of losses early, but in the end, I think that is what's gained trust in the community, because I don't do everything right and great, but at least people can say, well, we know that's Devine. We can count on, and you know, flaws and all. That's what'll create a relationship with the people you serve. If they trust you, and the trust comes from be that same OG, you know, progress and get better, but don't try to switch up for the gram. Don't, like you said, Yolanda, don't try to just be who you are. And especially our young people and kids and people, you know, adults that have been through the struggle, they can smell a fate. You know what I mean? That's why a lot of us don't like politics. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That was great. Thank you for letting us be so long-winded. These were my questions, by the way. So thank you for letting me.
No problem.
This is my last question, and then we're going to kind of switch over and find out more about you through our round robin questions. Okay. So my last question is simple. You do so much incredible work, Devine, in the community. That's obvious, on a regular and on a consistent basis. You inspire a lot of people, but I want to know what inspires you to do the work that you do. While you are an inspiration to so many, what is the thing that really makes you get out of bed in the morning? What's the thing that makes you keep going when you feel like quitting, which everyone does at times? What is that thing?
It's a lot of things, but I'm gonna just stick to two. One is just my family. You know, when I was raised, when you become a man and you have a family, you provide for your family. The way I was raised, it just wasn't with money, but it was what kind of legacy am I leaving? I want Carson and Zola to be able to I want my name to be able to benefit them in life. I want to be able to create opportunities and inspire my wife the way she does me. So family is a big inspiration for me. Like every day I step outside of the door, they're in my thought process. Like I used to have to tell my oldest girls, like, Jada would be like, Dad, I'm trying to get this gig at this place. She's a budding singer. And then my other daughter was the young activist. And she's like, Daddy, man, I wish I could get connected with the Carnegie Center. I'm like, just tell them who your daddy is. Like, that's why I've been out here grinding for y'all. Like, use my name. Like, that's what I want. But then also just young people, like just young people in general, white, black, well-to-do, just young people. Like, that's what drives me each and every day. How can I close those gaps? How can I inform and educate our allies? How can I uplift and embolden our kids? It's just young people, like seeing Charlize's daughter at the door, like, you know what I mean? Or when I, met somebody else to give them the books, like seeing their faces and just seeing them in this space in their life where they're still learning and they're fine tuning and growing. I'm like, that's the future. Like, that's what pushes me each and every day. So just young people and my family. That's two of the many things. And I would say this goes without saying. I don't want to get too preachy, but obviously it's my faith, and I won't get, this may be a whole other like podcast, but I feel like our faith is under attack. And and look, I'm a liberal person of faith. You know what I mean? I'm not ashamed to say that, but I'm disgusted when I'm seeing what media, society, extreme liberalism is doing to faith. Like, it hurts my heart. You know what I mean? So it's funny because I go into these schools and you're not supposed to talk about God, but I find a way to weave them in there every school I go to because I can't help it. And I feel like I need to combat that assault. Because to be honest, when things start changing for me in my life, it is when I stop making plans and just put my ear to his voice. And there were times, whether it was rapping out in the cold for 48 hours, whether it was being an introvert, and I mean that. Yolanda, you've known me for a long time. I'm talking like I was an introvert and God whispering in my ear, like, yeah, I want you to be a motivational speaker. Like, what? Like, to things like that. Like, it was literally me not understanding, me not even agreeing, and just saying, God said it, so I'm going to do it. And every time I've done that, I've seen progress, struggles, but progress in my life. So for me, definitely my faith first and foremost, but my family and just young people is what drives everything that I do.
That's amazing. You're amazing. Yeah. Charlie.
First of all, look, we're both ministers, so we're all about that God talk. Nobody will ever have to come on this show and not talk about God or think you can't talk about God, because we're gonna do that over here. But let me go ahead and give a quick plug before I get into my round robin. You are married to the lovely Miss Sierra Spalding, who is very close to both of us.
Yes.
So I want to give her a shout out with her Masterpiece Creative Group. And I want to tell everybody, she brands me. She brands whatever I do. It doesn't matter if it's my ministry, if it's my book publishing side, or whatever else I do. So I want to give her that shout out. And I know she's running around somewhere.
Don't forget, she made the logo for this show, which we love. We love the logo she made for.
And two, she is rebranding to Sierra Spalding.
I love
so
this.
Make sure on Facebook, like her page. She's really close to 2,000 followers already. So she does my branding. She's the logistical genius behind what we do. So definitely make sure you follow her. She got a lot of good things coming in 2021. So make sure you like her page.
That's amazing.
That's it. So you're ready for your round robin, and we're gonna wind it down.
Come on with it.
Three of us, you got three talkers on here. We could have been talking. So here's the first thing. You have all these books in the Luna Library. So tell me, what is your favorite book in the Luna Library?
Color of Law.
Color of Law.
Yeah, that's the one out of the high school that I've started to read. Color of Law for sure.
Okay, good. Because what's going to happen is when people watch it, they're going to be looking. I have a lot of people who want to look for books for you. So thank you for that. So you talked a little bit about this. So which hip hop artist influenced you the most in your youth?
In my youth, it was it was Nas as a young kid, but as I got to a teenage age, I would say Common.
Okay.
Common, because he always had that positive message.
That makes sense. Didn't he do Glory?
He did. With John Legend. Yes.
So now I know you did this hype video for NBA All-Star Damian Lillard, but I'm going to ask you this. What is your favorite sports team? You might say the Portland Trail Blazers. I don't know. But what is your favorite sports team?
So I'm a local kid. So all my favorite teams are Cincinnati. Cincinnati Reds, Cincinnati Bengals. As far as basketball, it's whatever team LeBron is on.
Oh my gosh. I think I just fell out. Come and throw a sheet on me, because
wherever Bron going, let's go team.
You and my husband, wherever he goes, that's the team.
That's it.
Okay, so here's the deal. You do a lot of work. You work all the time. But what do you do for fun? What do you do for play?
So my wife will tell you I'm a very uneventful. She hasn't said it, but I know she believes it. I'm a very boring person. So to me, the perfect time off is me sitting on that couch watching one of 1,000 DVDs in my library. I am a movie buff. So that's what I love to do. Okay. That's it.
Hey, but look, that's fair. Because when you're a creative person, your mind moves all the time. So just to be able to chill and do whatever you want to, I'm all for it.
And rest this. Yes.
That's it. So if you could go back in time and meet someone, who would it be?
Oh man. Dang, that's a good question.
It's not everybody.
Because there's so many. But I'm gonna go with my first thought, even though it isn't glamorous. I got to go with my first thought. My first thought was my mom's dad was born in 1901, so I would have loved to be able to meet his granddad.
Oh wow!
You know what I mean? I would have loved to meet somebody in my family that went through slavery, and just, you know what I mean, just what their experiences were, what they went through. That's just was my first thought, is just some of my ancient ancestors with direct lineage to my bloodline. I would have loved to meet.
Yeah, to hear the stories. You want to hear
yes,
the stories.
yes.
Absolutely. And really, I think about that. And we say all the time, there ain't no way I could have lived back during those times. We say it all the time. We all say it. But we don't know what we would have done back in those times.
To survive, you would have acclimated to what it was. That's right.
That's right. I believe. All the time. You don't know what you would have done. And so this is my final round robin question. So what, and I asked Sierra the same thing when she was on the show, what is on your music playlist right now? And you know the first thing she said.
Oh my God. She said what?
She said you. She said my husband.
She just saying being nice. Okay, so I ain't even gonna hold you. I had a whole bunch of slow jams on my playlist. At the end of the year, when Apple Music says, here's the songs you listen to the most in 2020, slow jams. So that means I was spending a lot of time with Sierra. You know what I'm saying? Like setting the mood, you know what I mean? I was shocked. You know, I'm a hip hop head, but numbers, I guess they didn't lie. So I'm an R&B head. A lot of people don't know that. Like I love like the 90s R&B era.
Come on, ding, 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 right there.
You know what I mean? Yes, SWV,
that's me all day long. That's me
all day.
All day long. That's me all day long. And my husband, he has a jump drive in the car that's got about 200 R&B slow jams on there. So we listen to Shy and Droop and
High Five,
Brownstone, High Five. So that's it for me. Hey, we're on the same page with that. So right now we are at the close, and so Yolanda's gonna close us out.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Devine, for joining us today. This has been such an amazing interview. You were the perfect person to close out the month for us, so we thank you. And also, we want to thank those who are joining us on Facebook Live and also our podcast, YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. We are so happy that you're here and you're listening. Thank you for helping us as we continue to shape our dialogue around real life issues and real talk solutions. Please like and follow our social media pages on Facebook and YouTube, and our podcast on Anchor and Podcast Player. Join us next time as we strive to be authentic, be transparent, and be inspired.
Thank you.
Thank you.